Welcome to Over to Europe. This podcast is produced by students of CIVICA, the European University of Social Sciences. I'm your host Aniket Narawat, a first-year Master of Public Policy student at Hertie School, Berlin. In history, we can see the role of higher education has changed according to the needs of society. We find Plato's Academy for philosophical and mathematical education. In India, we find monasteries where spiritual and material subjects were studied together. In China, the Han Dynasty established grand institutions to train cadres of imperial administration. In the medieval ages in Europe, character building certain sensibilities were core of the higher education. The education was to prepare certain class of men to take public offices. In the age of enlightenment, the emphasis shifted to critical thinking, skepticism, tolerance, and rejection of blind faith. In the past 100 years, the higher education is influenced by the economic growth. In this episode, we are going to make an attempt to understand the role of higher education in today's world and Europe. We are going to discuss how higher education is catering the needs of society today. We are going to discuss how technology is disrupting how we do higher education. To discuss this, we have Professor Vanessa Scherrer. Professor Scherrer is a Vice President of International Affairs at Sciences Po Paris. We also have Professor Liviu Matei. Professor Matei is a Professor of Higher Education Policy. Professor Matei also is Provost of Central European University. In the recent last 100 years, we can see that the higher education is specifically market-driven. I wanted to start with Professor Matei. Professor, what do you think about what is the role of higher education today in Europe specifically?
Well, it is, I think there are two implied questions here, or one explicit question and one implied. The implied question is whether higher education has a different role in Europe than in other parts of the world. And then what is this role? And I would answer the first question by saying higher education fulfills the same roles, the same functions everywhere in the world. And higher education has a multitude of functions, the most important of which being the production and the transmission of knowledge. But there are other functions as well. And if we talk about broader functions, societal, political functions, what is happening in Europe, what has been happening for more than 2 decades now, is that higher education has been used as a tool to support the European construction, to support the project of an integrated Europe culturally, politically, and also economically. And we have encountered or lived through or participated even in several such projects. So we have the Bologna process, which was started in 1999 and was meant to help create a European higher education area involving today basically all countries of Europe as a continent, from Russia to Ireland and from UK to Turkey, Germany to Macedonia, and so on. But the underlying idea was not only to have a higher education space, but through this contribute to economic integration, social integration, political integration, advancement in all these areas. So in that regard, there is a policy dimension that is specific for Europe. There are no other regional integration experiments in the world in which higher education has such a major role. But otherwise, I can give an entire, not only a lecture, a course answering these two questions, but I think I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Professor. Dr. Vanessa, I want to ask you, you not only worked in Europe, but you also worked in America in the higher educational space. Would you give insights about what is the role currently in the, Professor Matei has focused more on Europe. Would you like to give insights about what is the role of education in generally in the world today, higher education specifically?
Yes, thank you. And I also understood in your first question the fact that there was also before and now. So is there a difference historically? And so I'm happy to answer regarding the higher education globally. First of all, I don't think there is a reason why the traditional purpose of higher education should have changed dramatically. So there are eternal roles that remain. In addition to produce and transmit knowledge, as Liviu said earlier, higher education has played important economic, social, political, and cultural roles in the different periods of history all over the world. It's true that there has been important and accelerated mutations that have occurred in the recent decades. In particular, access to higher education has improved over the ages, and recently in particular, and that accent on the fact that universities are and higher education is an agent of diversity in societies is very important, and we should stick to this. More recently, also, higher education has been more connected to society, and the fact that the way we measure the impact of higher education on societies has become more important recently. And CIVICA, our European University of the Social Sciences, is central to this. But also, and maybe we'll talk about that again later, the quicker and more important mutations of the past 20 years, I would say, was related to the digital world that we now live in and the impact of technology on education. And in this context, more than ever, the need for society is for universities worldwide, and not only in Europe, to educate the young generation to become informed and enlightened citizens with a critical thinking and become critical thinkers. And on this, the role of universities in the social sciences in particular is really key. The generations of tomorrow will need critical distance toward the information and knowledge they have access to. And this is a central purpose of universities. And last but not least, and I hope we will talk about that again, and I mentioned that as a VP of International and European Affairs, is that higher education is also a very unique place where that has less frontiers in a way than other type of spaces. And so it is a place that constitutes access to dialogue and mutual understanding, cooperation, and therefore peace. And that's also a very important role that we have realized in Europe, as Liviu said earlier, but most probably is also a role that needs to be thought about globally.
Thank you very much. I'll definitely ask you both of you questions about Civica and specifically more focus in Europe. But before that, you mentioned an interesting point about digital transformation. Especially in the pandemic, we have seen that the world, all of the sectors are being affected. But because of pandemic, the higher education has been completely moved to the digital space. I am doing my first semester remotely now, so I can understand what is happening. So I wanted to ask you, Dr. Vanessa, how is technology is affecting the overall educational ecosystem? It is increasing accessibility. Can you just give us some insights about that?
Yes, thank you very much. And so you are inviting us to reflect on the horrendous crisis that we just went through. The only good news, if there is one good news in this terrible crisis, is that digital education has gained a legitimacy that it would never have gained so fast otherwise. And that was needed because, as you said, digital education can be a multiplier of equal access to education. It is an agent of democratization for many populations in the world, globally, and not only in the global south, everywhere. It's also a multiplier of learning in terms of pedagogy that we cannot disregard. And also digital education will expand the possibilities for lifelong learning, which is key for our societies. So all these are the meager good news of this crisis, even though there are challenges, of course. All this being said, I believe in the fact that universities are dense human spaces that can only prolific ecosystems and that can only have a positive impact on society if they are a place of dense human life experience. By that, I mean that physical experience, to me, is the core of higher education, and digital pedagogy can be a value added, but that would be the order. This is especially true for the formative years of young adults. After the family socialization of the young years and then the primary school socialization, universities offer a space and a time to become adult. That should be a time with human, tangible experiences. And in this, universities are incomparable spaces. In addition to the fact that that's where you learn and you from older generations. And so for this, I think we should mix physical and digital education together. But I'm quite certain that one is the core and the other one should be added to it.
Thank you very much for the answer. I can relate to what you're saying. The physical education cannot be replaced with the digital education, but digital education, as you said, has certain key advantages which can help us at least increase accessibility. Professor Matei, I want to ask you about what are the key challenges when we are adapting to this thing. Some of the we are from quite premium educational institutions, but if you want to expand this to, let's say, rural parts of, let's say, Asia, rural parts of Africa, there are going to be severe challenges in this kind of education also. Could you touch upon that a little bit?
I would link this to your first question about the role and main roles and functions of higher education today and how digital education plays into this. And I think what is interesting to observe is that higher education has become very central, very prominent in the public experiences in our societies, but also in the private experience of individuals. And let me just illustrate this a little abstract thought with two examples. So when we talk about the American dream nowadays, some people say the American dream is to have a car, a house, and a college degree, like suggesting that everybody should have a car, a house, and a college degree. This is something quite new, and we can discuss it. Not everybody will agree, but this is an indication. This very, articulation of the American dream is an indication about how central higher education, university education has become, and that will take me to the issue of access. But I want to give another example which speaks more for the societies, and I was thinking of this while listening to Vanessa previously. We are in a knowledge society, which means, among other things, that the individual advancement of societies, competitiveness of entire countries is based on knowledge, not on natural resources, size of the labor market primarily, and so on, but knowledge. And where is knowledge produced and transmitted? Primarily in universities. That's why we have this competition. Who in the world has the best universities? Who has them highest in the ranking? So higher education is also central for governments, for nations, not only for individuals. And we have this big challenge of access. Who has access to higher education and who doesn't? And some countries are very active and forceful in trying to increase access, increase the rate of participation in higher education. We have countries where more than 70% of the age group, whatever it is, 19 to 18 to 24, will go to higher education. Finland, South Korea, Cuba was the first for many years, and others where the participation rate is low. But what has happened now with the COVID crisis is that we understand a little better this challenge. There are also new aspects of the challenge: who can get access to higher education and who cannot, and what can distance education do. And there is this entire discussion about whether only online education is good or not, how much online education is good, what happens, what are illusions here and what are real opportunities. I remember I was once in a discussion with Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader now of Myanmar, and the foreign consultant. And the foreign consultant told her, forget about developing your own curriculum in universities. You don't have the resources, you don't have the time. You should just go online and have your students take courses from universities abroad. And that will solve you everything. It's cheap, it's immediate. And Aung San Suu Kyi said, oh, this is all very good, but you know what is the internet penetration rate in my country at present? That was many years ago, 1%. So I don't know, 1% of households have access to internet. So even if we were to do that, which of course it's stupid, you don't want to do that, just take the courses offered by other universities, it would not be possible. So there are these issues. Online education can increase access. And personally, I believe it is not a problem if certain programs are exclusively online, because it is not possible for some students, learner, to get access otherwise. And this is not only about remote areas. There is this formidable program in the United States run by Starbucks and Arizona State University, where they offer entire degrees, undergraduate degrees, 4 years, to Starbucks employees who didn't have the time, didn't have the resources to go to a university, to college, to attend regular courses. And thousands, I don't remember exactly the number, 20,000 perhaps, of people were able to get a degree in this way. Of course, it is better to have a blended model to allow for real life interaction with peers and with professors. That wouldn't have been possible. So I am not that worried about online only when it works, when there is no better chance for that. But as you are suggesting, in a way, there are many aspects we have to be careful about when it is possible. So instead of having online only courses pre-packaged for refugees in refugee camps, if we can bring them into a university, that is a lot better. So if that is not having any education, higher education is worse than having just online, but having online and real life in person is better when that is possible. So I think, as Vanessa was suggesting, the COVID crisis has allowed us to understand differently the opportunities and also the challenges that come with online education. I'll give one last example, and I'll finish here. We have very ambitious CIVICA projects that will take advantage of technology, advanced technology, and they will work, I have no doubt. At CEU, the faculty was adamantly against online education. We had almost zero online education because nobody believed in it. In March this year, we were forced to move to online education from one day to another, and it worked. And the faculty saw that it does work, it's interesting, it can be fun, as a matter of fact. So now nobody is against. So now the discussion is what to do and how to do it good, rather than whether to do it or not to do it.
One of the key things I think Professor Matei mentioned in his first question was the role of higher education in Europe specifically. Europe is not like any other country. The identity of Europe was formed like reverse engineered in a way. The European countries came together for certain goals, like economic goals, and then slowly the identity of being European developed. What is the role of education in this particular for formation of Europe, the binding of Europe, building the identity of Europe? Professor Matei, let's start with you.
Okay, so I'll be short. This is an excellent question. One of the functions of higher education is to help build identity. Group identity, national identity, regional identity, and higher education has played a very important role in Europe in the emergence of national states, in the emergence of Europe, and perhaps unfortunately, we have several Europes at present with several identities. So this is a very important part when we talk about the functions of higher education. And I would just say you can find it even where you don't expect it, because one might expect that while only at national level, for example, only new states or countries getting their independence recently get into using higher education to build national identity. That is not the case. Higher education plays that role everywhere. And my example here is the project in France a few years ago under President Nicolas Sarkozy, the so-called Grand Emprunt, the big loan, 20 billion or so to invest in higher education. I don't know what came of it, but one of the intentions of this massive investment was through higher education to assert French national identity in a global arena.
Which is also a very timely question. Why is it a timely question? Because we had the good news in the previous days that the budget for the Erasmus Plus program was increased in an unprecedented amount for the coming 21-27 period. What does this mean? It reminds us that the Erasmus program is the most popular policy that the EU has ever made in the past decades. And this popularity goes across all generations, all political parties, all countries in Europe. And it's very meaningful. It shows that higher education has been at the core of European identity, as Liviu said. And it has been instrumental in building support to the European project. And that goes again to what I said earlier. What is the EU? It is the historical success of building peace on a continent, a long-term peace on a continent that had never known peace for so long in history. And so we can see that higher education plays a huge role in this building of the EU and in creating recognition and self-recognition for all European citizens in the European project. So it's absolutely, higher education is absolutely key in the building of Europe for sure, especially when it targets the creation of knowledge and innovation. That's Europe compared to the rest of the world, but also when it targets the youth and it builds, again, the feeling of identity to Europe and to other European citizens.
Thank you very much. Europe has a lot of institutions, like some of political institutions who cover all of the countries, and then you have economic institutions like central bank, European Central Bank, who take care of all of the Europe. But if you look at the higher education ecosystem overall, Europe has a history of having really good institutions, like one of the best institutions in the world, but they are discrete. France has few, Germany has few, UK has few. They're all discrete. One of the key things that is happening through the projects like CIVICA is they're trying to connect these institutions. They're trying to build bridges between this so that the resources are exchanged. What do you think? What is the role of such alliances, Dr. Vanessa? Because you've worked around this heavily, could you talk about what is the role of exchange of resource among institutions? How this is going to help overall build a different level of a different kind of higher education system?
We felt that we would be stronger together in defending our voice of universities dedicated to the social sciences, and therefore defending not only and increasing the outreach of our universities and our capacity to create knowledge and to raise the younger generation thanks to higher education, if we could build that European campus together, but also stronger to advocate for the social sciences itself, which is also a very important project, but that we also needed to come together as Europeans to advocate for the specific European voice in the world today. So all these are important pillars of what we do.
I'll make only two comments, because when we talk about institutions here, I think it is important to distinguish between institutions of higher education like universities, colleges, and then also we should distinguish the European institutions, supranational institutions. And it's very interesting what is happening, because when you have to build a new political entity, this is not only about values, norms, but it's also about laws, and it is about institutions. And this is what has happened in Europe for a number of years, and this continues, and the present moment is very interesting. What Vanessa was talking about, the European University Networks, CIVICA being one example, is an attempt to create a new model of higher education institution that is not national, not Romanian, Hungarian, French, German, is not even a consortium of institutions from various countries, but one European university. This is very ambitious. We want to be the European University of Social Sciences. It is very ambitious. It is very difficult. Whether it will work or not in this way? I don't know. Not many people are willing even to acknowledge that this is one of the objectives of this European University Initiative, but I find this fascinating and is very important. Another part of this construction, wherever it may lead, has to do with building European institutions, not higher education institutions, but other institutions. And imagine that we had a European accreditation agency. And instead of having a French diploma or a German diploma or a Romanian diploma, you would get a European degree, because every university would be this was on the table 15 years ago. It was rejected because countries didn't want to give up their right to grant degrees or to accredit degrees. But we have something that is called the European Registry of Quality Assurance Agencies. So this is a European institution that accredits, in a way, actually only acknowledges or lists national agencies. So this was our way to get to a European diploma without calling it a European diploma. And this is only one example. We have the European Research Council, which is a European Union institution for organization to fund research and so on. So it is very important to see all these attempts at building supranational institutions, European institutions, as part of this process of European construction, which I should say it's a little stalled at present, but there are still interesting developments.
And if I may add to that very quickly, Aniket, sorry. And thank you, Liviu, for reminding that indeed we are also building a new model for higher education. And I'd like to add that it's also very close to the EU spirit, the EU being a state without borders. We also realize that this CIVICA, like all other European universities, are going to be multipliers of opportunities for our students, for our faculty, for our staff, because we are opening our spaces. Because universities now are very sovereign in a way. And now we are opening the borders of each of our universities, which we started to do before, but with that concept of the European universities, we are opening ourselves to each other, and that will benefit to all our communities in terms of being multipliers of opportunities and also densifying the European identity.
I should mention that this podcast, which is again comes as which is kind of a representation of CIVICA values. We had professors from all the 7 institutions. We have students. I had opportunity to talk to all of the whole point of this podcast was to bring the people of different institutions together and have a dialogue about different things, like having someone from Paris, having someone from EUI, like different institutions, and giving the platform. I think that is the core to CIVICA, like creating a platform where people can come together to build something. And as you were saying, the question about sovereignty, what do you think? This is very key. This is again a new way ahead created by European EU. But do you think the alliances is future? It's going ahead. It's not just for EU, but in general, it's a new step forward for like transatlantic relationship between EU and China. The institutions bit not just stuck to just discretely in one city or one country, but common open sources for all the people. What do you think about this?
So the question was, is this only an experiment of European relevance, or it might be relevant and useful for the world? And it is very interesting what is happening, because university was supposed to be universal. This is how it started. So it did become very national. It contributed to building nation states everywhere. Now we are in the middle still of this regional experience. But you are right. So there is something in this initiative, the European University Networks, that hinges on going beyond just Europe. It is not automatic and it is not easy. So if we are by design a European university, the European University of Social Sciences, how will this contribute to open up avenues to the world. I'm not sure we have operationalized that very, very exactly. But this is something that the European Commission thought about when launching this initiative overall, and we are also thinking as part of our own initiative. And but I think this will. I mean, it will always be there. It is always there, but we have a lot of other steps to make before we go, full throated at extra European dimension of the European University project.
First of all, it's only natural that we go European first, and we understand why this initiative came from the EU and could only be done in the EU in the world today. So that's very obvious. It doesn't mean I will be a little more optimistic than Liviu. Because in general, in higher education in particular, but in general, I strongly believe that one of the specificity, and not only one of the specificity, but one of the definition of the EU is that the EU is a creator of norm. So if we succeed in showcasing the fact that by coming together, we will be stronger, we will be more open, we will be more democratic, we will be more united in our diversity, I'm hopeful that other universities in the world will want to join our game, and then we could expand to them and with them. And actually at CIVICA, we are already reflecting on working with non-EU partners. And maybe we will also show the norm for such developments in other regions of the world. So, and I like to think that that's one of the roles of the EU. And so this is an opening for tomorrow and for other spaces.
So my last question would be, as we are discussing this, the whole concept of alliance, the whole concept of building bridges itself is a new next step in the future. In a way, CIVICA itself is like a future of the higher education. What do you think? Like, what is the role of higher education in Europe and generally in the world in the future, from now and 20 years, 30 years down the line? Professor Matei, let's start with you.
Well, I am not a prophet. I don't know, but I think there are changes. This how preeminence of higher education, very strong visibility of higher education. I think it's starting to fade in some countries, in some parts of the world. Appreciation for the role of expertise is not the same as it used to be in many parts of the world. The fact of having a higher education degree being part of being an expert. So I expect that there will be changes also accelerated, if not generated, by the post-COVID period. But I would be more willing to observe and think than about these changes than pretend that I know what they will be at present.
Yes, it's indeed a complicated question, but so I'll also 2 points maybe. First, I think our role has always been, but will be more than ever, to defend evidence-based knowledge. That is what universities do. It is absolutely at risk today. And so we need to pursue with creating science, with creating knowledge and transmitting knowledge that is evidence-based. Why? Because this is key to create concordia within societies. Second, I'd like to reiterate the special role of the social sciences and the humanities within the higher education sector on our impact on societies. More than ever, in the very technology-driven world in which we will live, in the societies that will be flooded with information, with the controversies that will come for science and that will be played with politically, it is absolutely key to develop critical thinking, and mostly critical thinking regarding your own action. And that takes training in the humanities and social sciences. And I hope that we will be able to all work in a multidisciplinary perspective and join forces in these two directions.
That was Professor Liviu Matei and Professor Vanessa Scherrer. We discussed the current state of higher education and how it is evolving today. We also discussed what is the impact of technology on the landscape of higher education in Europe and the world. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Over to Europe is produced by Nicholas Fellows and me, Aniket Narawat, with the help of CIVICA Community. Music in this episode was created by Kevin McLeod. This podcast is funded by German Academic Exchange Service. Subscribe and learn more at www.civica.eu/over to Europe. Stay tuned for our next episodes.